So good afternoon, everybody. I'm glad to see you're here. Lots of people are coming in from lunch and from their classes, but any of you that know Professor Lisa Marie Barber, you know that she likes to start on time. Have you ever noticed that about her?
Students are kind of like, yeah, I do, I not notice it, but it didn't happen.
So she likes to start on time, and we want to keep this on time. So I'm just going to do a really brief introduction for Professor Barber. And I guess I should say who I am. I'm Leslie Walker, and I'm Dean of the College of Arts and Humanities here at UW-Parkside. Why am I in front of you today? I'm not usually in front of you. Usually the person that's here is Colin Mathis, and Colin Mathis is the director of our galleries. But Colin is stuck in Mexico. He's not able to get back because of that big storm that's going to, unfortunately, come through Florida a little bit later today. So I hope to see Colin next week, apparently, is what he told me. So, so let everybody kind of sit. How do you feel, Lisa Marie? Should we go?
I'm good. I mean, I just don't want people, we have Trenton here.
Okay.
Wisdom to share, and I know
All right.
we have an hour.
All right, so it is a short period, yeah. Okay, so Lisa Marie Barber is originally from Tucson, Arizona. She's, excuse me, she's a full professor in the Department of Art and Design here at UW-Parkside. She teaches and serves. Okay, she teaches first, and raise your hand if you're in her ceramics class. Woohoo, cool, right? Yay for clay. So she teaches, in addition to her, I haven't talked yet today. So in addition to her teaching responsibilities, she's also the Community Liaison in the Arts for the College of Arts and Humanities. She directs 2 programs. She directs the Leadership and Professional Studies, as well as the UW Collaborative Associates of Arts and Science degree. So those are the 2 programs. So Lisa is very busy. Lisa Marie's aesthetic sensibility is rooted in Latino folk art and Mexican Catholic shrines of her heritage and her upbringing. Deliberately showcasing the handmade quality of her work, she uses low-tech methods to create large assemblage ceramic large ceramic assemblages, which turn into sculptures and installations. For some reason, those 4 words were hard for me to put together. In addition to doing these assemblages, she also works in mixed media quilts and clothing, as an example today. I'm sure Lisa Marie.
Tucson.
Yep, there you go. You got Tucson right there. So in addition to exhibiting nationally with over 50 solo and 2-person exhibitions, she has had several artist in residence positions and led workshops from New York to California. Join me in welcoming Lisa Marie Barber.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone, and we'll just get this moving so we can, get Trenton on here soon. But thanks so much for coming. It's great to have this opportunity. I know I teach. I'm in a classroom with a lot of you, but I don't really share what I particularly do unless it's like a trick or advice on how to make something. So this is a little sample of who I am and what I make. I've actually been active now for almost 35 years, and to have like 20 minutes to talk about 35 years, especially I'm an active maker. I make a pretty big body of work every year, so it's like, what is the sample box here? So that's what you're gonna get. I'm gonna talk to you a little bit about my influences first. So this is Tucson, Arizona. Anybody been there? Yeah, it's a great place, Sonoran Desert. This is the Saguaro National Monument, one part of it. If you've ever been, anywhere in the West or the Southwest, you'll have the saguaro cactus, seen as the logo for places like Las Vegas. No. Tucson and northern Mexico, a little bit in Phoenix, but that is where these cacti are. So it's a beautiful place, very different landscape from here. This was the kind of work that I always thought of as art, because it is art, and this was the work that I grew up around. So murals in Tucson, now, murals are so hip that you can actually, like if you're gonna visit Tucson, you can Google for the mural tour and they'll have all these, murals everywhere to see. But I grew up, as Leslie said in the introduction for me, my mom's family's from Mexico, and Tucson isn't that far away from Mexico. I don't know if people know that or not. When I was growing up, you could go across the border really easily. It wasn't a big deal. We had family still in Mexico when I was a kid, my mom's aunts and uncles and cousins. So I would go there often. These are the kind of things that I would see. These are also the kind of things, in fact, the piece there on the right is one of my mom's little nativity scenes that she liked to collect. But these tree of life ceramic pieces where there's just all this stuff together, everything is stylized in kind of a simplistic way, or at least that's how some people see it, but there's a lot of it, there's an abundance. That's the kind of aesthetic I grew up with. As well as these, I remember going to Nogales, I don't know, every couple months or so, and in the late 70s and early 80s, these were really in. These are called perras, and these are these fiber pieces that depict scenes from everyday life. Some of them actually, there's kind of a really interesting history with them that I didn't know about, that they would get really politically themed. They originated in Chile and also in Peru, but they were very common things that you would see at the curio shops in Nogales. And again, when I was growing up, and even up until recently, these were in my parents' house, like 4 or 5 of them. This is the Sanavir Mission. If you ever go to Tucson, I hope you go. It's a beautiful place. I'm biased, of course, but this is a mission that's just about 9 miles south of downtown Tucson. And I grew up in a culturally Mexican Catholic home, and we would go to cathedrals, we or in church, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 times a week, it seemed. Not even seemed it, I think that's true. But this is kind of like the Mecca of all Catholic churches in Tucson, and I would dare say in southern Arizona. It is on the Tohoto O'odham Indian Reservation and is one of the oldest still standing missions from colonial, early colonial Spanish architecture. And it was made by the tribe, the Tohoto O'odham, when they were there, and refurbished even recently. They still are there, I should say, but back in the day, made by the tribe and still refurbished by the tribe. And the thing that I really gravitate towards in this type of work is, again, that busyness, all of this gingerbread, all of these things put together. Also, there's kind of this, I think of it as pretty humble. The figures are stylized, they're carved out of wood, things are made out of adobe and clay. Just here's some snapshots of just different areas of the church. So you can see even the hand-painted, stylized, they're a little simplistic. They're not like super realistic, which you might see in other European types of cathedrals or missions, but this is what I'm used to, and this is what influences me. Ofrendas, which are just shrines or altars. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about this with Dia de los Muertos becoming a bigger deal. That's sort of one from the textbook there on your left. That's mine in my house on the right, because you gotta have one. And then this is me. This is where I'm gonna start here talking about my work. This is me as a senior in college. I went to Northern Arizona University, and I actually got my degree in sociology. And I didn't declare my art minor until the last semester of my senior year. And I was going to go and be a lawyer. Oh, I think, did we lose sound? I can talk loud enough for everyone. Well, I'll keep talking. Oh, sorry. I was going to start. I was going to be a lawyer or maybe a social worker. Those were the kind of things that I was thinking of being. And my professors at the time actually thought I was an art major. So when I was telling them, they're like, what are you going to do? I was like, I'm going to go to law school. I'm like, what? So because I made these really big things, and I didn't even realize at the time that that was anything that was notable. I mean, I knew I made the biggest stuff. I knew I was in the studio all the time, but that's just what I like to do. So they recommended that I may just try out, see if I could get into graduate school and get into an MFA program somewhere. And that MFA is Master of Fine Arts program. That's what they call the terminal degree, which I always think is kind of a scary term. You're gonna get the terminal degree in visual art. So about a few years after this, I start at UT Austin. So in Austin, Texas, I was very fortunate to get all my schooling. I got scholarships every year to go there. So it's really helpful. This is advice I like to give students. If you are interested in going to graduate school, you know, a lot of times you might think of the best place, like this reputable place, whatever place will give you money and even pay you to be there is where you want to go. Or at least that's my advice to you. Because, and as I show you a little bit about my career here, if I didn't have that freedom from not being under, you know, debt, there are a lot of things I couldn't do in my career. I couldn't take a lot of risks that I actually ended up taking. But anyway, I was just very fortunate to get funding to go to to UT Austin. And these were some of the pieces I made, and they're just getting bigger. And hopefully you can see some of that aesthetic I was showing you in the influences from like the Mexican folk art and the Catholic churches. So this is called the cake. And there's all these different pieces, all these different parts. Every time I set up a piece like this, I have a whole bunch of pictures to kind of show how the puzzle goes together. And the pieces just kept getting bigger. So these are really early pieces. These are all from when I was in graduate school. And they start to get about 25 feet wide and about 15 feet to 20 feet deep. They start getting really enormous. And I just worked all the time. I knew when I was making this work that the only way I could make this work after graduate school was to actually get a job at a place like this, to be a university professor, or maybe be lucky to be at some fancy art center where they, you know, gave me a giant space and access to a bunch of kilns. Luckily, I was able to get a job, but yeah, so these are all from graduate school. The funny people on the top right there, that's actually sculpture from one of my classmates that was graduating at the same time. One of the issues of being an installation artist, which is what I became, I didn't plan to do that, I just, you know, the work just kept getting bigger, is that your documentation often comes from the space that you show your work, that you exhibit the work, so you always hope you have a good space to show it in. If you are traveling your exhibition, and this is back before you had a camera on your phone, and this is back before digital cameras and such, you know, I'd have to find a photographer in the area. If it was, you know, not in my hometown, like if it weren't in Austin, if it weren't in a place where I knew people, I had to find a photographer. They did slides, and the whole time you're just hoping that the slides turn out okay before you take the pieces down. Everything is kind of more extensive planning than I would say a lot of other shows. So these are samples. This piece was actually inspired by Diego Rivera's Man at the Crossroads, where there's this, it's kind of my fun, playful take on it with the little kid at the center and different parts of industry and creativity and the world around her. Here's a sample of kind of what's in the foreground. Everything is ceramic, so the clay, I use clay that everyone throws away. So even though those of you in my ceramics class, I harass you about not throwing away so much clay, now I just can't go through it as fast. But I take whatever clay people throw away, I slake it down into slip. Some of you in ceramics will know what that is. So it's just mud. So let it get into a mud state. I take sawdust from Professor Baylor's studio, and I mix it in the clay mixer. It makes it an extender for the clay, so it's less clay per square inch, which means it goes further, but it also means that it ends up being lighter. So, you know, I'm still one of my what I see as my top achievement is I don't have any back problems doing this work for almost 35 years. Knock on wood. But yeah, so the surfaces, about half of the surfaces that you see, I mix up myself. I just add pigments, almost like a painter. I have like bases, like a base clear, a base white, a base sort of flat tone, and then I have pigments that I can mix in and fire them at different temperatures to get different types of surfaces from glossy to matte. Sometimes things get fired multiple times. So to get a job, and because I knew I needed to get a job, just in case anybody's wondering, nobody buys installations, really. It's hard, you can't really have a commercial career unless you're super famous, which I'm not. So you have to go out there, you have to try to show your work, you have to get noticed, you have to try to get accolades, you need to have a national reputation. And when you do such big work, showing your work means you're renting U-Haul trucks a lot and budget trucks, and that's me. That's not me moving into an apartment. That's me doing a show. And for about the first 15 years of my career, most of my shows, well, a lot of them I shouldn't say most, but I'd say at least 30 to 40% of them all had to be solo because the work was so big. And then they required a U-Haul truck or a budget truck. And that's where it gets into the things about like not having student debt and things like that, because you can take that risk, trying to get to that next level in your career depending on what that is. So I did this for 15 years, but it took me about 5 years to get my job here at Parkside. I had a 3-year position at Santa Clara University in the San Francisco Bay Area. I taught for a year in Fresno. I actually moved from Austin to Fresno, making the same, like my paycheck was what my rent was. And I substitute taught. I live really lean. I've had years where I didn't have a vehicle, just public transit or ride my bike. I'm not into furniture, technology. I just don't buy a lot of stuff besides shoes, maybe. And that's sort of an inside joke for some of you, but live on the cheap so I can afford to do the work. And so this is the first piece I did here at UW Parkside. This is Heart-Shaped World. Yeah. Yeah, the figure there on the left. So one thing when you make work like this that's big is, maybe you thought about, it's like, where do you put all this stuff, Lisa Marie? You do have to think of storage. I have a garage, I have a basement, but I also like to retire pieces. So after about 5 or 6 years, I just offload the pieces. I give them away. This was the longest piece I held on to. And I decided to show it. I saw it in the basement here at Parkside. I'm like, I just need to get rid of this. So I showed it in a gallery in Racine and said, I'm not taking this home, so you guys got to figure out how to get rid of it. And Leslie, Dean Walker, decided she wanted the figure there on the left, and I said, well, as long as someone else moves it. But yeah. So anyway, I use a lot of imagery of cities. I love cities. Planes kind of have this spiritual thing for me. For whatever reason, I think of them as angels. They're in all my pieces typically. And figures, the figures that you see in my work are almost always going to be life-size, so that will give you a sense of the scale. But yeah, so this piece I kept the longest at about 20 years, I think. And here's some examples of it close up. So abstracted buildings, everything kind of stylized, nothing having to be super articulated or realistic. And now I'm going to really start bouncing around with my work. But yeah, so, going around, trying to show, doing different artist residencies for long periods of time. This is a piece that came out of, actually I did it in Tucson. The first time I got to do something professional in my hometown. I never got to do that until about, 2005, I think this is from. So I left Tucson in 1988, and it took me that long to do something professional in my hometown, but I was part of the university's Artist and Lecture series, and they let me be there for 4.5 months making stuff. So I was like bringing stuff down and then just building, took over a part of their whole building, making work. And when, I always try to keep active, showing work, hoping that, it gets noticed, hoping that, I'm still understood in the community as being active and, what I'm doing is not just for me, maybe. I get solicited sometimes by places that want to interview me or want to feature my work. And when I did that piece, the American Craft Council had discovered it somehow. I don't even know, but they wanted to feature me in their magazine, which was a big deal at the time. And as Tom said recently, they don't really do magazines anymore these days. This was something more recent. It was kind of an honor to the National Council on Education and Ceramic Arts, or whatever that acronym is. They're like the biggest deal in ceramics, and it was nice to have them feature my work even recently as, like the headline for their conference. This is more recent work. This is Urban Playground. One of the things that's happened with my work in the last 15 years, I said the first 15 years were all these installations. Last 15 years has been more of these smaller, I can't call them installations anymore because to me installations mean U-Haul trucks, and I call these like the minivan pieces. They can like get into a minivan. But this is about, I think this is still about 11 feet wide, so it's still pretty wide. I've been able to buy big backdrops for these pieces, so they've kind of become, they live more now as isolated pieces with like this neutral background rather than the bigger pieces that always had the gallery memory intact in it. Here's samples from it. I started to do this piece was the first big piece that I had done that didn't have a full-size figure, and I couldn't even just get away from not having a figure, so I had to make like a little baby figure up there. And so that's me in the urban garden piece. And then I do other types of work. So this is a painting inspired by, this is also called Urban Garden. And if you've gone to Hotel Verdant, they purchased this work. It's up there if you go there in Racine. Again, another sort of minivan piece. They let me paint on the walls here. This was at the Lady Vocus Art Center in St. Louis, Missouri. Or no, Kansas City, Missouri, sorry. So stylized highway, those are cars, and this is this little highway, and this became the inspiration for this painting, which those of you who were around during COVID, this was like my backdrop in all our meetings or during class. And then, every so often I'll do just sort of random stuff, like a hybrid between the fiber work and the clay work. So this is called The Bride. There's a side view of it. Dean Karpowitz has this on his door. It was used as the cover for Stray Light. I forget what year, but, kind of a nice little thing to see, those things. For me, being a ceramic artist, I can't get away from having to do pottery. I do like pottery. All those people who in my ceramics class, I hope you know that. I have to do pottery demos. So here's just a sample of my pottery, just for fun. Again, very playful, kind of ornate. Most of them function. And I also make single figures. They're a lot easier to have included in group shows. So if I get an invitation to be in a group show, or I really like to travel. Doing shows is a great, at least for the States particularly. I've been to almost every state just through exhibiting my artwork. Having pieces like this that I can drive there in just a regular little car makes those kind of shows accessible, bigger group shows. So I make single figures. I have a whole bunch of these. And again, they're about life size, so little kids. This is a recent piece that actually was just retired. I just had a show just south of Chicago about a month ago, and this was another piece where I'm like, I'm done with it. They got to take it away. And it's called Boy. And a few years ago, I showed its companion, a girl, in the gallery here, and this is its companion boy. And here's just a sample of my process of making things. So, again, I have that clay that I mix up. It's always different. It's always a different color. I just don't care. It doesn't matter. It's free. It's cheap. And you can see just sort of the starting of the building. I had a couple spare parts from a previous piece that I changed to make into a stool for the boy. And the building, and then it gets refined there. What you see, the tools there on your right that are right by the foot are about half the tools that I use. I'm very low tech. I have about 4 or 5 tools that I use making my work. And then there's a close-up of the boy. So again, him being built, him being done in his environment. Another before and after. So figure on your left, just finished in its clay stage. You gotta let it dry out, then I gotta fire it, and then I color it with different types of ceramic materials. So this is alegrias, which means happiness or joy. Hands make flowers, because I couldn't think of another name, and her hands turn into flowers. Sorry. So again, before and after. And these, again, are all kind of, minivan pieces. This one's probably smaller. This is about maybe 3.5 feet wide, 4-foot footprint, probably. And this is the piece that's in the show when it was in progress. And if you've seen the show, it's changed a lot. Again, even though the pieces aren't that big, every time I document them, every time I move them to set it up, it takes hours, it takes a lot of time. I was saying I make a pretty good body of work, or at least I strive to make a solid body of work each year. And then I have to photograph it and document it. So I turn the studio, I do my ceramic work in the studio here, and I have all these different places where I put up backdrops, and then I have to set everything up, and I'm taking my shoes off not to get the cloth dirty, and trying to hope that I've set it up so that there's enough space, and then I would crop this, and this would be the image that would be used to document it. And particularly since I'm not keeping the pieces very long, to be able to have good documentation is important. So yeah, every year in August, I have my annual documentation party with the photographer here on campus. This is my home studio. This is where I make my fiber work and I sew my funky clothes. You can see my painting there. Underneath the tables, this is how cheap I am. I mean, this is my furniture. It's like a $10 chair and plastic tables. Underneath the tables is a lot of the custom fabric that I make. Some I decorate myself, but a lot of it I'll order, like what I'm wearing now. And so these are the mixed media quilts. These are pretty big. They're different than what you see in there. The ofrenda quilt that's in the gallery now, but this is typically the quilts that I make. And it's a variety of different materials that get used. And so here's a close-up where I just kind of wanted to point out there's charcoal, like that's a charcoal drawing. The house and the buildings is charcoal drawing. I go over it with watered down matte medium to kind of, keep it into place. There's ink pen, Sharpies. I use different types of dye techniques like batik dye and let's see, what else do we have in here? There's embroidery, there's paint, all sorts of different stuff. This is another one. That one was about 7 feet tall, so they're pretty big. This one isn't as big. This one's maybe like 6 feet. This has shrinky dinks in there, and again, sort of this really easy batik process that I do with just Elmer's glue and fabric dye to get like the buildings and the planes on the bottom left-hand side. And just sewing different parts. A lot of times, my own clothes eventually become part of the quilts. This piece was just, this is a newer one. These are all from around the last 6 or 7 years, but this one's from a few years ago and was just purchased by the Racine Art Museum, so maybe you'll see it in RAM sometime soon. This is really a lot bigger. It's about 9.5 feet tall. And it's done the images are created through cyanotype, which every so often I have like these cyanotype fests where I just keep making all these drawings and then burn the print in my backyard, in my garden. So I would go home after work and like give myself the job of make a drawing every day after work. And then those would become transparencies that would be used in cyanotypes to make the images in a lot of my new quilts. So there's our drawings. I'm almost to the end. Haha, I almost up. Sorry. This is work that I don't show, but I really see it as, it really is a big part of my creative life. Is I call it my scrapbook wardrobe series, and I make this custom fabric, usually from memories. Some of them are from artwork that I've made. Sometimes they're from family memories, things in my house. And then I make outfits. I didn't tell you, but the whole reason I ended up in ceramics or taking a ceramics class in college was because my parents wouldn't let me take my sewing machine away to college. They thought it was going to get stolen. So clay was was a substitute for sewing. So now I'm back into my sewing realm. So I can't tell you, I've made so many jackets at this point, so many sweatsuits. I've been making memorial pieces, so kind of ofrendas that I would wear. This one, I've lost both my parents in the last few years, so this one was for my dad. And all the pieces that are there are like memories related to him, pictures of him. And for my mom, she passed away recently, and the quilt that's in there was actually leftover scraps from the series of clothes that I made to commemorate her and remember her, and then wear them also at the events. So there's kind of a meaning with them too, where it's not just the making of it, but it's also there's like a ceremony to me of like wearing it to the events that honor her and my dad at different times. And I think and I'm still making stuff. So that's just some recent things that I've been involved in. And that's the end. Thank you.
You want to hook up and I'll introduce? Yes, no, he doesn't. Okay, thank you so much, Lisa Marie. That was lovely. Trenton Baylor is our next speaker. Trenton hails from Milwaukee, and as an undergraduate, he made an excellent decision, and that was to come to UW-Parkside to get his degree. After he got his degree here at UW-Parkside, he went on for an MFA. You all know what that is now, Master of Fine Arts, at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Currently, Trenton is an associate professor, and he teaches sculpture, digital fabrication, woodworking, and future design, furniture design, which could be future too. His work reflects an interest in the beauty of the natural world, as well as the contrasting elements of architecture, machinery, and man-made objects. He too exhibits nationally.
Hello. No response. That's terrible. All right. So, I don't know what the hell I even want to say. And the truth is, I don't speak very much. And most of you know me. I don't speak very much, do I? And to be honest, I certainly don't communicate anything through anything that I make. It's purely personal to me. And in many cases, there are no concepts or ideas that I want to share per se. It's really all about the making, the process of making, and enjoying that. The end product is really, in most cases, not that important to me. It's all about process. So you'll see, actually, many of the pieces that have been created, as you look at them from the beginning to the end, you'll notice that there's fewer and fewer references to my life and to who I am, and even any references to the fact that I've been able to make them, or that I did make them. So I'm kind of washing myself out of anything that is representation of what I'm making. So what you're seeing here, two pretty important things. The truck on the left was my dad's. It's got 2.5 million miles on it. And that was passed down to me when he passed away. And the flowers on the left are a great representation of my mom, and the flower in the gardens and everything that's there. And the reason why they're there is it's important that you understand the contrast in my life. It was always about a lot of contrast. I'd be riding with my dad and, traveling south, and he'd be telling me about things like, well, I'm grossing 80,000, I've got 34 on the drives, 34 on the spread, and 12 on the steer. We're running about 1450 hot. Got to keep it under 200. I'm going to split down and lose about 200 before I crest the hill. I'm going to get that one back. Those are the things I'd hear, riding with my dad, and I'd go home and my mom would say, well, pick up the shovel. We're going to move the zinnias to the left a little bit. We're going to dig up those sedum, and we're going to pull those forward in the garden. And we're going to layer this garden deeper because I want more height in the back and I want it to progress to be lower in the front. I also want my color choices to be different. I don't like how it's laid out. So there was all this contrast in my life. They didn't quite fit one another, but somehow they were all about precision. When my dad was talking, when he was talking about how he was running that truck, it was all about precision, right down to he knew what the temperature needed to be, he knew the speed he needed to run and all those things. My mother understood precision as well and talked about those things and how laid out the garden and the house and everything else. So it's kind of a common theme throughout the work. I was going to be an engineer, and I think now I am an engineer. My robot transformation. So the painting that's on the left side is one of the very last paintings that I've ever done. And it was kind of at the end of my graduate work. And as you can see, it's all about engines. It's all about the mechanics. And it was being done right about the same time I was finishing this 1950 GMC. So it was a 1950 GMC pickup truck, but all of the running gear was completely done. I put a Chevy 350 in a 4-speed and all that kind of stuff and did a little bit of drag racing, all legally, not really. But it was, it was just part of who I was. And as I was finishing up, my graduate work, I realized this painting stuff just isn't for me. It's not doing what I want. It's communicating something, but I don't care about that. I have to move on to something else in my life. There's a young me, no beard and about 30 pounds heavier. But one of the first things that happened to me at the later portion of my graduate work is I had this opportunity to do a public sculpture. And it was actually funded by Grainger, a Grainger tool. It was funded by Grainger. And I had this opportunity to take this train engine and have it cut apart and rebuild it. And it was a great opportunity for me to kind of understand what it meant to do work on a larger scale. I also had to work with engineers within UW-Madison because it was going to be on campus. So we were walking through so many things that you wouldn't think about, but how deep and how many layers of a weld needed to be in place to be able to hold something that was of that size in place. How much of an angle and a canter that could be used for holding up a piece of that size. So it was a great learning experience for me, and it just kind of solidified that idea that I'm doing something different with my life, or I want to go in a slightly different direction. And since then, I've just kind of built upon that. So from here on out, I've made things that look like furniture or that are furniture. I certainly was doing sculpture at some point in time, but those were things that were just things. And I realized, well, maybe I can start to make objects that could serve some purpose, at the same time kind of scratch my itch to engineer things. And that's really what's going on in these couple pieces. It's all about balance, it's all about precision, it's all about being able to make something that's going to have a particular function and to be able to do that well. At the same time, I'm kind of deconstructing some things for myself. The piece that's on the right-hand side, you can see it kind of looks like a piece of furniture that's been deconstructed. And I spent quite a bit of time, it's actually 250 hours in just making and screwing up and making and screwing up and making and screwing up. The machining for those aluminum parts that are the rails for the drawer. Just a lot of trial and error. I loved every minute of it. Hate the piece. And the one on the left is a liquor cabinet. If you're going to do things, you know, over and over again, you probably have a little liquor. If you're of drinking age, that is. Forgive me. My family's always had a lot of land in the South, not so much anymore, but I'd have these really lengthy experiences with my dad, Mississippi, you know, running through the woods or walking through the woods and just kind of experiencing once again something completely different and looking at how nature deals with engineering and deals with structure, but also kind of taught me about things that you don't see. You see the tree that's above the ground, but you don't necessarily think about how much is underneath the ground. There's really oftentimes more in the roots down deep than there is actually up high in the canopy. So started making stuff like this. No more to say about that. And that. Going back to contrast, I can't stay in one place too long. I'm never comfortable doing the same thing over and over again. I'm always moving to something different and then maybe coming back to that, picking up some information and moving to the next. You know, so these are definitely in contrast to these pieces, right? But then, you know, I got to get past that and I want to do something more like this again. And even between these two, not being really kind of comfortable and enjoying the process so much or the final product, the difference between the one that's on the right there and the left, the one that's on the right is all handmade. I mean, everything about that is starting with wood and building this up as a wooden model that is then cut apart, made molds, cast, welded together, so on and so forth. So then I decided, well, why don't I just go get some sticks out of the backyard, right outside the studio that you keep tripping over, and make another piece. And that's, you know, kind of the contrast that's present there. So always trying to find something new and a different approach, never kind of keeping with the same approach. Lots of machining, lots of understanding of how the parts and pieces need to come together. The molds, I make the molds, and then I take them to a foundry, which is just a fantastic experience, being able to work with a commercial foundry, having them be able to, you know, kind of meet my specs and knowing what needs to be done for them to be able to meet my specs, and then bringing those back to the studio and manufacturing them as something that serves as a piece of furniture. But, you know, I did a little drag racing, I did a little hot rodding. To me, it's all about building. I don't care what it is. A piece of furniture and a hot rod are the same to me. A piece of furniture and renovating a bathroom is the same for me. The gardening and a piece of furniture are the same to me. It's all the same because it's all about process, it's all about precision, it's all about thought, so on and so forth. So, you know, oftentimes go to hot rod shows and kind of think about how I want to approach that. Finding ways of then getting to a final result or something that I think is going to be appropriate or is going to be the right design. So this is what would be called a maquette. Now, I know my students, when I say do a maquette, they're like, no, I'm not doing a maquette. Those are the dumbest things ever. But you know what? I do them too. Because if I have an idea, there's a lot of time and money and effort and energy that has to go into them. And I can't get it wrong. So there's an example of a maquette that did not end up being the final product. But it showed so many faults and so many issues with my design that allowed me to move forward. So I'm going to show you just a couple images of some process, and then we'll be done. How much time I got? Oh, dang, that's not wrong answer. So you can see the piece on the left-hand side is the progression of the starting point of a chair, and it's just pink foam, basic insulation foam that you might see or use around your home. Shave it down, whittle it down, sand it down, and then body putty. the same body putty used in automotive applications, using that to really refine all my edges and my contours, and just working every one of those lines to as much of a perfection as I can, to the point where it doesn't look like anyone made it, is what I'm looking for. I'm not going to show you the casting process, but the lost wax casting process, and you get all these cast components that then need to be reassembled back into that original form. And each time I weld the seam together, there's a bead around there that has to be ground down and typically hand filed, because once again, I want that line to be as consistent as possible and look like almost machine made. So I'm removing myself from everything I do. There's no hand, there's no little bit of my remnants, no, hey, that's a Trenton Baylor there. I'm trying to scratch all that stuff away. Coffee mug. Can you spot the, I should have done it should have been a find the mug or the thermos, the coffee thermos in all the images, but they show up quite often. Can't make work without coffee. Absence of my hand, even my fingerprints. When I get to this point, I have to wipe it down to the point where not even my fingerprints are present because it would affect the patina. But it's also a little bit of who I am. I'm wiping myself out of this piece. It's all about the process, the presentation. And I say that, and some people think I'm lying, but that's honesty. And to be honest, I haven't signed a piece in many years. I actually did sign a piece because I had to give it away, and I thought it was pretty important that I gave it away. But most of them never get signed. And someone asked me not too far, or not that long ago, well, what if somebody steals them? Nobody's going to steal them. There's the piece. Once again, you know, going off of change and contrast, going to my roots of, you know, wanting to be an engineer and thinking about manufacturing and always kind of being in these manufacturing spaces with my dad and you know, just kind of enjoying that little bit of what I could see. Decided I wanted to go out and make bigger things and kind of expand upon what I was enjoying as far as a visual look and appearance, and pulling information from a number of different places that I don't feel necessary to talk about, but started doing these more public pieces that are oftentimes in city limits, sculpture walks. There's one here in Kenosha, various places throughout the Midwest and the United States and actually around the world. So I started making bigger work here, which meant I had to find a way to deliver them. Well, you know, to be honest, I always just wanted to be a truck driver. And if you're going to make things, if you're going to make big things, then you should make big things to haul big things, right? So it makes sense to find an old raggedy 84 Kenworth and drive it home illegally. Not that I didn't have the license, but this thing was definitely not road legal. And I would have actually been put in jail for driving this home. It was that not legal. But I did get home, and you can see 2015, brought it into my studio, and I had to build. I have to build, to build, to build, to build. Even the crane that is used to lift the back end up and to pull all the back axles off, I built that to be able to then build the truck. To be able to build that truck, and then to be able to haul my sculpture on it. So to me, once again, it's all about the process, no matter if it's something really small and thinking about how I'm going to approach and solve all the problems that are present there, to things that are big. It's the same to me. A few challenges in life have brought about a different kind of thought process that is maybe kind of showing up in the work now. And, you know, these cranes, these architectural things, they're all kind of cold, but they're rigid, but they have a purpose to them, which is kind of playing into how I'm currently thinking. And as part of this piece that's being The image that's on the right-hand side is not the actual finished product. It's much closer to being finished than it is right there in the image, but you can see the CAD design. So this piece is purely computer-aided design and almost purely computer manufactured. So this one's being cut with the CNC plasma cutter here on campus, and parts are also being routed with the CNC router here on campus. But me being who I am, I have to use machines to build machines to make things that look like machines made by machines, right? Once again, just kind of wiping myself out of everything and making objects that look like machines make them, or almost in some cases as if anyone could make them. So this is my milling machine. It's in the studio, and then on the right-hand side is the CNC plasma cutter that I've designed and I'm currently building. I'm almost to the testing stage, getting really close. So when I think about this piece, it's really just a puzzle. It's just like, did anybody do those snap-together models as a kid? That's really what it is. I'm building my own snap-together models. It's just a bunch of parts that anyone could assemble to make something that they think to be interesting. And once again, just via a couple different processes, finding ways of really bringing dissimilar objects and shapes and components together to make for that. And you can see the CAD file on the left-hand side and the final product on the right. So many of you don't know, but if you've seen the piece in the gallery, I made the bottom portion of it, but I actually hired a former student, Mallory Olson, to make the spiral component. Once again, I'm moving away from anything being, or mostly moving away from things being objects that are made by me and look like I made them, into almost objects that anyone could make, and anyone can contribute to the conversation and what it looks like. So I'm actually talking with some other designers, makers, artists for some future pieces that will be, there's a new piece that is kind of a vase that's going to be made by Harold, a friend of mine. I'm going to work with a glass artist here soon, and she's going to encapsulate one of my pieces. So it's really just about finding all these ways of being able to bring a number of things together. Not necessarily that I want to communicate anything, but I just want to share in this process of making things. If you take nothing from this conversation or if you don't take anything from this conversation other than this, I want you to understand, just make. You don't have to be tied to a label per se, but what I really want you to be tied to is actually being active. You got to get in the studio, you have to make consistently, no questions. There are no challenges that are too difficult that would force you to stop making. You just have to make. Does that make sense? I'm done. Oh, wait. The last one. That's my next piece.
So thank you very much for those two wonderful talks. I mean, at one hand, I'm very impressed by a kind of common exhortation by these artists and your professors, which is get in the studio and make stuff. Right? Both of them share that, and you can see how much they're making, and yet they're also at other ends of a spectrum, one with the touch, the hand, the low tech, and the other with erasing the hand of the artist. And having a machine, making a machine that looks like a machine, which is just wonderful. So these contrasts are great. So I invite you to ask questions of Lisa Marie Barber and Trenton Baylor. So raise your hand if you got a question.
Only easy questions, please.
Oh, ask them hard ones. Those are the good ones. And I know that we're hitting that 1 o'clock hour, so if you need to leave, just don't hesitate. Yeah, right here with the hat.
This question is for both of you. I asked this question similarly after every talk, but Mr. Baylor, you specifically said that there is no challenge that's too much. So have you ever been faced with a challenge while creating something where you had to truly take a step back and maybe would second guess that there is no challenge too big?
I don't enjoy it if there isn't a significant challenge. I mean, if it's too easy for me, I'm not even going to finish it. Yes, I've done many pieces, and I'm only showing you a small sample of the works that I've made, but there's maybe even a greater list of works that no one will ever see because they never were even close to being finished. So certainly there are situations where I have to throw in the towel, but that usually means I'm taking all that information that I've gained from the failure and then rolling it into then something that's far more successful. And that might mean a completely different direction. Did that answer the question? Okay.
Is that for me too? Well, I mean, I just like to make things, kind of, you know. It's not challenge that really inspires me. I just have ideas all the time, like, oh, I just want to make this, or I want to make this, and then it's usually I get kind of in a rabbit hole and make dozens and dozens. So even with, like, the installations may start from, I want to make 1,000 handmade flowers, or I want to make dogs, or I want to make airplanes, or flowers, or cyanotypes, or things like that. So I just usually have an urge to make, and then I just want to make stuff. But challenge, I don't know, I think I want more fun. I mean, well, he's having fun doing it. I don't think, you know, one of the things I like about being low tech is it's just easy for me. Like, it's just everything is right there. I don't have to buy. I'm very cheap, so it's like I don't have to buy anything. I don't have to ask anyone for help. I don't have, you know, I can carry my tools besides maybe my sewing machine and a kiln. I can carry them with me, so I can always make wherever I go, kind of thing. How do I make them? Yeah. So I make them very similar to the clay pieces, and kind of goes off of the question there. Like, I usually have an idea of something that I want to make. I never think of the final project. I'm sort of, I can't, we used to talk about this years ago, I don't remember, but I'm like I'm the opposite end of the spectrum in that I don't make a maquette or a sketch. Everything sort of evolves into what it is. So a lot of times what you may see in the finished product is maybe 5 different pieces that I'm working on at the same time that might get cut up and pieced together and rearranged and changed and added to become whatever they become in the end. So it is very similar in that it's all process, but the end goal is never really something that I envision until I get there. Say that again? Oh, well, for the ones that I showed you there, those are all like hand stuff. Like, they're even hand sewn. The one that's in the gallery here is actually, this might be the only time I exhibit it. It's not really, it doesn't really go with the rest of my work, and you know, that I did use a sewing machine. It's probably the most traditional quilt I've made. But yeah, drawing. The printed fabric, though, that is something I send away for. So I don't do that. But everything else is drawn on, painted on, ink, dye, different methods, different traditional textile methods. But yeah, if you want me to give you information, connect with me and I'll show you how to do stuff or tell you. Yeah.
First, both of you, fantastic presentation. And you both talked about your parents having, you know, influence, and also that you had an original direction that you were going to go that you didn't go. So I'm just curious about what your parents feel or felt about where you went with your work. With your work.
I think in the end, my parents are proud of the direction that I took. They never really forced me to do anything. they were always fairly supportive. They really wanted to stress that it was important that whatever you do, it has to be done to the best of your ability, whatever that is. You know, my dad was a person who would deliver into, you know, some really small mom and pop shops, and then would deliver into some multi-billion dollar industries. But he treated everybody the same. He thought that the person sweeping the floor was just as important as the CEO running the company. And he kind of imparted that on us. I'm sorry, both my parents imparted that on us. Just do it to the highest level, whatever it is. So that's what I've been trying to do.
Yeah, I thank you for the question. So I have a very distinct memory with that. And, you know, my parents always saw me as the artist in the family, and I always made stuff, but I never even thought of it as a career. I mean, you know, I studied something else in college, and some of that is just, and some of you students may feel it too, is just, I mean, my parents always struggled to make ends. They were school teachers. They weren't, you know, broke, but we were a big family, didn't have a lot of money. And to me, I knew I didn't want to be broke. I knew that early on because it was just too tough, right? So I never even thought of it as being something. So when I graduated from college and I was thinking of going to law school, you know, and you know, I was sitting there, I remember kind of looking at, this is before computers, so, you know, you have like handouts from places that have sent you information. And I was at my parents' house, and I said, you know, I don't know, I just don't know if I want to do social work, you know, and then I have these teachers that are telling me maybe I should try the art thing. And I'll never forget, my dad just like looked at me and he said, well, you should do your art. And I had never, if they had said that to me previously, I'd never heard it until that moment. And it was like him saying that to me, it was like, I just forgot law school, I forgot social work, I forgot all these other things that I thought of doing because, you know, I felt like I had permission. And again, not that they ever said don't do this, they always appreciated what I did. And even when they passed, like the amount of things that they saved that I made for them just sort of blew my mind. But yeah, it was that, if you all become parents, I mean, and I'm not a parent, but I think that that kind of thing just, you know, goes so far. Because here I am, and you know, I wouldn't have I made that choice right at that second when I felt that sense of permission. So thanks for the question.
Others? Yeah. Both your works have been shown to be a little bit more like abstract than what your inspirations have come on. Because of the abstraction, has there ever been a point in time in both of your lives where you're making a piece where you're so fixated on perfection, but the perfection of the abstraction? I'm sorry.
Perfection of it. Well, I can say one thing real quick. I mean, I taught life drawing here. And, you know, one of the things that was tricky, not taking so many, I just took ceramics classes pretty much as an undergrad, and I took drawing, you know, sort of later, and everything was expected to be observational drawing, and it's such a really good skill to have. Like, I still believe in having those skills, but I think one of the hardest things is trying to get rid of that. Like, it doesn't really bring me joy to make, I mean, for some people it brings them joy. For me, it doesn't bring joy. I'd rather do something weird with it. So I don't know if that sort of gets at that sense of perfection and abstraction, but.
Fixated, like, oh, it's not looking the way I want it to. And I know, like a lot of your pieces show that they don't need, like, symmetry for it to be, like, perfect, but is there a time, or was there, like, a moment you're, like, doing something, like, it's not perfect the way I wanted it to become? Yes.
It's never perfect. And that's, I guess it's one of the drivers for me. It's one of the reasons why I continue to make things, is because I've made something and it never meets my expectations, whether it's from a design standpoint or from a technical standpoint, which drives me to make more, and to come up with solutions to help me get a little closer. I hope to never actually get there, though, because then I'm done.
thank you so much for coming out. And I believe we've got an artist talk next week as well. Is it next week or 2 weeks? I think that's right. I think it's in 2 weeks. Our next artist talks are going to be in 2 weeks. And do we remember who they are? Carrie and Dan. Carrie Waters and Dan Martin, graphic design, same room, same place in 2 weeks. Look forward to seeing you, and have a great day. Enjoy this beautiful weather.